What are some of the biggest mistakes podcasters make when they start out and they're trying to build and develop their new platform?
Podcasting can be a marketing effort to just talk about the things that people really want to hear.
Like YouTube's done a lot of what television was doing, but taken it to the next level.
Feel pressure to be on YouTube and create a video. So now you need some lighting. Now you need to shave. You'll note I did not shave. Oh, have you heard of this thing called podcasts?
Just really changed. I think a lot of people are more open to independent media now than ever before.
It really doesn't matter where people do sort of make contact and acquire you. It just matters that you get yourself out there.
We are back for another episode. Thanks for joining us. And I met our guest today working in the radio scene many, many years ago. He ran a powerhouse rock station in Winnipeg, Manitoba at the time, known as Power 97. He has since left radio and launched the Sound Off Podcast Network in 2016 and has been helping independent voices find their place through podcasting. And I should note that our podcast, the Mikeseapodcast, is currently under the Sound Off Podcast Network, and we're grateful to be working with Matt. That's the guy, Matt Cundill. Matt, welcome, man.
Thanks. Great to be here.
I want to get into what we were going to discuss today, and it's all about podcasting, and I couldn't think of anybody that's more of an expert than you. Most of the time when we speak, I'm calling on your expertise and your consultation because, I've been doing it several years now, but I still feel like I'm an idiot in this space, and so I'm glad you're just a text message away because I need to call on you because there's a lot and there's a lot of direction that you've given us to get where we are right now. And podcasting's really taken off as a primary source of information for a great number of people now. They're literally like the majority of what I watch and listen to these days versus, conventional television, cable television and stuff like that. And like, it's the same thing with television. Like YouTube's done a lot of what television was doing, but taken it to the next level. Like, how do you see all this evolving over the next few years? Because this happened very quickly.
Yeah, so I think there's a few stages when it comes to podcasting. It started off as just a simple RSS feed. And you can credit somebody like Adam Curry. That might be a name from MTV that a lot of people know. And he was one of the ones at the forefront who came up with this idea of the RSS feed, a piece of audio that when it gets updated can, be sent out to a phone and you can listen to the updated audio. Fast forward to 2008 when Stephen Jobs takes Adam Curry on a walk through Apple. And I'd like to include podcasts in iTunes. And so then podcasts wind up in iTunes. Well, fast forward again to 2015 when Serial, and this is really where NPR and American Public Radio really, hit a home run with audio, and Serial became sort of like one of these water cooler pieces of audio that everybody got into. Oh, have you heard of this thing called podcasts? Mm-hmm. And I'll fast forward again one more time, maybe through the pandemic when a lot of people were at home and started to explore it or even to listen to it. But one of the things that has began to happen around, it's been evolving over the years, and that's YouTube, and just how easy YouTube is to use. So some podcasters would put their video of their show up on YouTube, and then people would see two people talking on a microphone. Oh, that's a podcast. Yeah. Eventually, some people forgot to put their podcast into Apple and Spotify and iHeart and Amazon, and they were just saying, oh, this must be what a podcast is. So one of the big things in recent years has been the explosion of YouTube. And YouTube, people sort of see podcasters talking to each other. It's easy to see. It looks really good. And the definition of what a podcast is now really two people sort of talking on microphones on YouTube. That's what people sort of look and see what it is. You really should have the audio out there. And to that, people will see a show on YouTube and then they're going to say, oh, that looks like a good show. I'm going to go catch up with that over on the audio side. And then they find that the audio side's not there. So it's become a little bit convoluted and confusing exactly what a podcast is. I still believe that a podcast is tied to the RSS feed. I think it's something that gets updated on your phone more than anything else. For instance, we do this YouTube show. If you want to make a change to it, you can't really do it. You have to upload a whole new video and start from scratch. But on the audio side with an RSS feed, we can always sort of add things to the audio, subtract it, make little changes as we go. And for those who are looking for, freedom and owning your content, an RSS feed is going to do that a lot better than YouTube can offer you because you are tied to an algorithm.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode with you about podcasting is because it feels like everybody and their brother wants to start a podcast now. I was just having this conversation with our friend Drea Renee. Big shout out to Drea. If you're listening, Drea rocks. She's the host of Hey Babe, Can We Talk? It's a podcast. Go subscribe, go check her out. She's great. But I was talking with her about how so many people want to start their own podcast now and what a time commitment it is. And it's, more than anyone, it's not a small undertaking. And anyone that's done this for any period of time quickly learns that it's a lot of work and it requires some level of research depending on what your content is going to be. You need equipment to do it, although not as much as maybe you needed in previous years. It's pretty simple now. You need to set up hosting and all the technical aspects. People don't think of those things. So can you just give our viewers and listeners a basic understanding of what a person needs if they're really going to consider doing a podcast?
Yeah, long runway and a lot of patience and a lot of time. And it's hard. It is hard making great audio. And you and I have been making audio for years, and we've gone back and forth over what constitutes something that's going to be really nice in the ears. And even people who go out and get the best equipment really don't know how to use it. I think the best example is the Blue Yeti. Well, I need a microphone. Well, they like to go buy the Blue Yeti at Best Buy. It looks good. It looks like you're a podcaster. It's all the other podcasters look like it. That's a hard microphone to use. It's also not very good. And I also see a lot of people pointing it in the wrong direction, and nothing breaks my heart more than seeing somebody use a piece of equipment wrong and doing it wrong. People also get into a very echoey room. That's not going to be a very good listening experience. So people think they're doing it, but it's really about the end user and how they're going to receive the content that you're putting out. So, and then when you add in a camera, because you got to be on YouTube now. I mean, first of all, you don't have to be on YouTube, but you're going to feel pressure to be on YouTube and create a video. So now you need some lighting. Now you need to shave. You'll note I did not shave. You need to look good. You note I'm not looking good. I've got an ink stain up here on my microphone or on my headphones. It's there is certain criteria here to looking good, being good, and doing it. And a lot of people, it's hard to overcome. It's a lot of it is hard to overcome. And then I've put all these obstacles in front of you. And we haven't even gotten down to what it takes to make great audio. And now you have to edit it. Now you have to find a great producer who's going to make it sound like really warm and fuzzy in the ears. And you're up against a lot of competition. And when we say competition, I'm not talking about other podcasts. I'm talking about if you're going to put your show on YouTube, you're now against every other TV show that's out there. If you're going to, and this is why I encourage people to make great piece of audio, because it's a lot easier for people to listen than it is to watch your show, and they're more likely to listen to your show as well. But it's got to be really, really nice to listen to. So you're up against, things like NPR, and in Canada, you're up against CBC, and, you're up against Dateline NBC. You've got to have something that is, I like to sort of think of the 3-2 hockey game. It's got to be reasonably close. You got to be able to pull the goalie and get that tying goal. But if you're producing something that's just far and away and you go, well, the content will speak for itself. I go, nah, it's got to be good to listen to.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I've noticed just over the years was, I'm a broadcaster by trade like yourself. And so I always look to the big corporations for what I wanted to watch. So, you mentioned whether it's NPR or Dateline or whatever it is. But I've just noticed in recent years, just with things like Joe Rogan and the different podcasts that have come out that are so popular that are just more independent. And I feel like now I'm a lot more open to new content that I wasn't open to before, just as a lifelong broadcaster. And I think podcasting kind of did that. It sort of evolved what media is and what I expect from it. And some of the top podcasts that I listen to now are not tied to a big corporation. They're standalone productions now. They might have like a deal with Spotify or whatever, but they're independent standalone entities now. And that's just really changed. I think a lot of people are more open to independent media now than ever before. I used to reject independent media 10, 15 years ago.
Right. So it was because we both worked at, for companies that were gatekeepers really to being in media. Right. And, in 2016, I sort of had this this moment where I walked into podcast movement in Chicago, and everyone was talking on microphones and exploring this new space. And I thought to myself, oh, these are all the people I told to go away who wanted to have an overnight radio show to talk
Yes.
about Dungeons and Dragons. And I said, take your Dungeons and Dragons and get lost. You will never be on Power 97 for the Dungeons and Dragons hour. Well, they went home and started a podcast and became very popular and became the leader in Dungeons and Dragons in their space. And that's, I think the great thing about podcasting is, we talk about that freedom. You don't necessarily have it on YouTube. You are beholden to their standards and their algorithm, and they're going to push what they want. However, on the RSS feed, get a website, get the RSS feed, which means you can put your audio out, and you own both those things. That's incredibly powerful, to be able to have that independence and freedom to put those out.
Yeah, and it's really given access to a diversity of voices and opinions too. I don't know if that's I think it's a good thing. We live in a very divided culture here in America. I don't know if it's the same in Canada right now. Like there's a great chasm between how people think. And so I like having access to a diversity of voices and opinions. Whereas I think before, as you said, all the bigwigs were the gatekeepers, all the major media companies, and they controlled what went out there. Those days are gone.
I think we're seeing in the media landscape that we're seeing opinions come down to A or B, black or white, one or the other. I think the media does have a lot to do with it, but it's great that we can put out, podcasting voices and representation and stuff, but who's going to listen to it, right? You've got to be able to connect that to the right people. And I think people really want to hear all 2 hours of what you have to say. I think long form audio and video has really lent itself to building some personalities. I know Jordan Peterson took off because of a long form interview that was published by a network in Britain. I mean, she was just fishing for sound bites, but in the end, here was a long form piece of audio and video that people really, really liked. And so, and I'm not here to discount, traditional media, because a lot of people still watch CBC. They're still watching CTV in Canada and global. There's still a lot for NBC, CBS, and they're also doing podcasts. I might point out that if you're on YouTube and you have a podcast, well, NBC has podcasts as well. It's called Dateline. So most of their properties are now masquerading as podcasts as well. They're not really podcasts. They're just really sort of video channels that are put out there, but they're being called podcasts. And take it one step further. Who's looking for great conversations between two people? Turns out Netflix is. So Netflix is looking to see, are there any talk shows that could possibly come to our platform that could get exclusivity? So Netflix is now shopping for podcasts as well. So it is a bit of a media free-for-all. I'm not here to discount media, but it certainly doesn't hurt to appear on a podcast.
Yeah. And the authenticity of it is, I think, why it's so successful. You mentioned Jordan Peterson having like a 2-hour conversation. That's what people want to hear now. They don't want to hear these 15-minute segments of going to commercial breaks and on to the next topic and, well, we've got to wrap this up now. They don't want that. They want to listen to people for 3 hours. I mean, it's almost like you've taken media, which used to be like this painting on a wall, and now you're part of the conversation. So when you listen to some of these long form podcasts, you feel like you know the person.
Yeah. And to that, though, I mean, if you're going to get into doing podcasting, I think it's really important that you get in. You're not here to have a massive audience. You're here to go and find the right audience. So if it's about health, talk about health. Talk about the things that are really going to matter to you, and maybe even push your business. Podcasting can be a marketing effort to just talk about the things that people really want to hear. And so it's a way of community building. I think traditional media has always been about more. Let's get a lot of people. Let's get millions of people. That's not really what podcasting is. You don't want to have a mass audience. You want to be able to go and find the right audience.
Yeah, definitely. Talk about social media. It's a non-negotiable now to not use socials if you want to market your podcast and have a brand out there. So talk about the role of social media in marketing a podcast.
Yeah, so this is actually a little bit on the newer side. Social media has always been a help, but it used to be word of mouth. So for instance, I just discovered a new podcast. It's called Hey Babe, Can We Talk? And that was done through word of mouth when you mentioned it to me earlier in this episode. That is actually now the number 2 way that people discover a podcast, is by somebody telling somebody else. The number 1 way is through social media. And I really think that sort of lends itself to the amount of time we spend scrolling, whether it's Instagram Reels or on TikTok, looking for a piece of content that's going to entertain us. And again, we are beholden to what TikTok and Instagram and Meta are going to push out in their YouTube Shorts as well. I want to throw in there as well.
Yeah.
We are a little bit beholden to that. I will also say that just because people make contact with that, reel or video, doesn't mean that people are going to start listening to your show. They're going to know about your show.
Yeah.
There's the difference. I always like to use the example of the Calm Down podcast with Aaron Andrews and crap, I forgot the other one's name. Sorry, that's not good on my back. But anyway, it's there. But I don't listen to the show, right? Clarissa was her name. But again, I don't listen to the show, but I know that it's there, and I feel like after watching a minute of it, I know what the show is about. It was an entertaining piece. I move on.
Yeah,
that's my relationship with it. Will I download it? Yeah, I might have downloaded a couple of episodes to take a trip, but it really doesn't matter where people do sort of make contact and acquire you. It just matters that you get yourself out there. Now, before you get overwhelmed with social media and think you have to do it all, I would suggest that you choose the social media platforms, the ones that are going to work for you. For some people, it's going to be X. For some people, it's going to be Facebook. For some people, it's going to be Instagram. For some people, it might even be Pinterest. It's likely going to be YouTube Shorts. It could be TikTok, but that's going to be up for you to decide.
Right. And let's get into the specific do's and don'ts. I'm pointing this conversation to people that are thinking about starting a podcast. We've both been doing this a while. I still consider you the expert here. You've been doing it a lot longer than I have. What are some of the biggest mistakes podcasters make when they start out and they're trying to build and develop their new platform?
I think not knowing what the first 3 episodes are going to be about, and then not knowing what episode 12 is going to be about. So you need to think long runway here. And by that, I mean 3 years. It takes 3 years to build an audience. It doesn't matter if you're a radio station. It doesn't matter if you're a TV show. It doesn't matter if you're like a local hockey team. If you want to build for the Stanley Cup or the Super Bowl, those teams are taking 3 years to do it. There was talk about that rebuilding process. I think you need to give yourself 3 years in order to really build it. And it does. And then the other thing, I think being consistent is really important. And then putting your content out. So those are just a few of the things that you can make a mistake early on. The other thing is why are you doing this? And if you're doing it because you think you're important or you have something interesting to say, that's okay. But what's in it for the listener? You really, really need to think about the listener in the end game and what you're trying to accomplish. If you're building community and you know what that community is, I think it's a good thing. Podcasting's hard. So make sure it is either the number 1 or number 2 thing in your marketing strategy and your life. I know that's a reach, but if you're in the C-suite, if you're running a company and you think you're going to be able to delegate this podcast out to somebody down the hall and it's just going to be a ledger line on the marketing sheet, don't do it. You will lose. Make sure it is one of the most important things about your marketing plan. Make sure it's number 1 or number 2. Anything below that is really going to get lost. You're just not going to care about it enough. And you really do have to care. I might also point out that if you're thinking about it as a branded opportunity, definitely do it. But then ask yourself, are you the right person to be doing this? Should the CEO be the voice of the branded podcast? I'd probably say no. I don't think you are. I think it's probably something else. Talking about yourself. I mean, if you're Widgets Incorporated and all you're going to do is talk about widgets, that's not going to be very interesting. However, are there stories behind the widgets? How did widgets become important? Why do people need widgets? Why was it that, widgets became very, very popular? What's the story behind that? This is a storytelling medium. So tell stories.
Yeah. It's funny what you said. Know what episode 1, 2, and 3 are going to be, but also know what episode 12 is. You and I have discussed this in the past. There's also room for evolution. And so we started as just a strictly health and wellness podcast. Then we started encompassing more lifestyle stuff and even just interesting stories. And we've made some pivots along the way in the last 5 years. And, we're trying to make our focus a little less broad right now. But people are going to experience that too if they've been doing it for any number of years. You've gone through that process with the Sound Off podcast too, your own, right?
Well, episode 1, took 11 hours to make 11 minutes. That was the first one. It didn't sound very good. It was done over a telephone. It was an interview. It was messy. And the first 5 episodes didn't even sound good, and I needed to get help. And then I went to episode, I think probably like 100 and change before I fixed the sound and made it sound less like radio and more like podcasting. Mm-hmm. So there was definitely an evolution. Then I found myself interviewing. I've always interviewed podcasters from the get-go, but it became the show about broadcast and then became the show about podcast and broadcast. It used to be the podcast about broadcast and then became the show about podcast and broadcast. Because at some point the two began to intersect. And even to this day, I'm like, how can I retool this to make it sound a little bit fresher every time? I interview somebody and then we talk and people like the interviews, but is there more, that I could be doing? And I think the way, by the way, to evolve that is to take your show for a ride. Get in the car, listen to it on Apple CarPlay, listen to it on Android Auto. Listen to it the way you're listening. Go for a run and stick a pair of earpods in and listen to it. How do you think it's sounding? Yeah. So I think that's a self-check, and I think that's something that everybody needs to do on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, people can learn to edit their own podcasts, but it's something they really have to want to do. It's a lot of work, and I was doing everything by myself for the first year and a half, and it was draining. I mean, everything from coming up with finding the guests to preparing the interview questions, editing the podcast, producing it, putting it up everywhere. It was like a full-time job. And now my amazing wife helps with a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff and the production. But this is something that people have to consider also if they're getting into this space and they want to start a platform. What kinds of solutions can they turn to have their stuff produced if they don't have the time, desire, or the manpower to do it? You guys do production over at Sound Off, right?
Yeah, correct. I got to episode 265 before I stopped editing my show and I outsourced it. And I found somebody very wonderful to do it. And it was really because it became more about the things in post-productions, things like social media assets, things like writing great show notes. This is a full package experience. So artwork is so important. We don't even talk enough about artwork. If you look at inside your Amazon or your Spotify or your Apple, there's a picture for you to have episode artwork. Don't waste that spot. It's all about the packaging. Make a nice piece of artwork that's going to be marketable. Write some really good show notes that's going to capture people's imagination. Title the episode well. You want to write a little bit for SEO. In this day and age, right? So the author tag, make sure your author tag, make sure your titles are well done. All these things really lend itself. Now, there are tools out there that will make it easier. So right now we're using Riverside to record this. Riverside has some great editing tools inside. It can also help you make a few reels or some shorts or whatever you need to kick those out. So many great tools are here to help simplify the process of doing this. And so you want to do video. Okay, it will allow you to do video. I mean, Riverside's a great investment for what you pay. I think it's $24 a month. I think Descript is the counterpart to that. That's the competition. Another good tool that you can use. Most people want to pick one or the other. A lot of people use little things like Opus clips to make their social media clips to put out there. I think editing is really important. Outsourcing it is a great idea. Also, we do podcast management because you're like, oh, how does it work? Do I put it to Apple? Do I do it to Spotify? Do I do it to YouTube? We explain all that and we connect you to it. And you only have to do it once. You just tell Apple, this is my RSS feed, and out it goes. And it sounds simple, but it's just the idea of being everywhere and having a podcast manager is something that will really, really, we're here to save people time. And when we save people time, we save people money. And in that time that we're doing sort of the grunt work and the legwork for you, you can be out finding ways to market your show. You can be out finding ways to monetize. We can talk about monetization if you want in just a sec. But we're here to free up some time so you can do things for your business and your podcast.
Yeah, and monetization, I'm glad you brought that up. How do people approach that? And do you have to have a certain base number of followers or subscribers before you can consider that avenue?
You do and you don't. I think you should have an audience that is well defined. I think if I listen to the show, I can hear who's listening to it. It's very, very simple if you're talking about widgets. You just go back to the widget community and you can sort of monetize within there.
Yeah.
Again, even if you only have 1,000 downloads, well, that's fine. Widgets aren't very big anyway. Not a lot of people want to buy them, but we have all the widget people listening. Therefore, you there is an audience in there to market towards. And this is the difference with mass media. I mean, mass media, yeah, here's Verizon. There's a Verizon ad. People need a phone. But let's say you want to have a show about something that's very specific. I would ask people to do the following. And that's imagine there's a convention of people who listen to your podcast, right? And they're all there for a reason. What would you charge for a banner at the front of the room at that convention? And that's your pricing model.
It's a good way to look at it, man. I never thought that.
It's probably already happening anyway. Think of the last convention you went to. And if it was about the subject matter of the business. So, because businesses do, we're going to a convention, we're going to Vegas, we're going to put up a display, well, what would you charge for at the front of the room? To have everybody in the room go and listen to a keynote speaker. That's kind of the pricing you should be targeting towards. Well, I got 500 people listening to my podcast. There's 500 people in the room. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Charge more.
Yeah. And something that came to mind when you were speaking was just, having that defined audience and whether you're talking about widgets. And I've talked to podcasters that they had subject matter that was too specific, and that's all they covered. One example is a lady I know did an interracial dating channel, and it was great. I mean, there was a lot of information on there. There's a big audience for that. We've touched on that topic on this platform with a lot of great feedback. But because that's all she was talking about, it became very challenging to come up with new content. So I think sometimes there's challenges in a subject that's too narrow. You almost have to split the difference. Have you found that at all?
Yeah. For instance, talking about broadcasting in an era when broadcasting is diminishing is probably not wise. But I would probably say to anybody doing an interracial podcast that your show is about relationships. Mm-hmm. And from that, by talking to people, you do become an expert in relationships in some capacity.
Yeah.
And so I would probably just sort of take a step back and grow that base a little bit. But, maybe it's not about interracial, marriage. Maybe it's about relationships.
Yeah.
So you can pull back just slightly a little bit and then create this sort of wonderful spot for you. I might also say that when it comes to monetization, you could be monetizing your podcast and not even know it. It might not be about getting direct money from the show. It could be very simply a marketing adventure where, and this happened to me, I put out the first 20 episodes and then people sort of you're getting trust. Trust is a huge commodity.
Yeah.
You're getting ears. You're building relationships between, emotionally through people and your voice. That's worth a lot. That's actually that's a form of marketing, but it's also monetization because down the road people will be like, oh, hey, listen, oh, you want to talk about interracial dating? I got the person for you to speak to. That's marketing. Money comes to you in different forms. It just might not be a check in the mail with an ad.
Yeah. Talk about some other ways to gain organic growth. We talked about social media. We talked about SEO. We touched on that. What are some other avenues that people can use just to market their podcasts?
So some people like to ask me what my favorite method is. And a couple times I've said that I go to people and I say, have you listened to my show? And they say no. And then I push their head into the car and say, why haven't you listened? Are you going to listen now? And they're like, yes, I'm going to listen now. But that's not a very acceptable form of marketing. Mm-hmm. But I would encourage you to just tell people about your show more than anything. And you can be a little bit shameless about it. So every time one of my guests has a birthday, I go to their Facebook page and I say, hey, happy birthday, Fred. Thanks for coming on my show. And then I leave a link on Facebook. It can be very subtle and fun ways. But all of Fred's family and friends are going to see that, oh, Fred was on a podcast. I can't wait to listen.
Yeah.
It's a subtle, small thing to do more than anything. But it's really just, when I look at marketing is just making yourself really involved with the situation, right? So go into Reddit groups. Go and be a participant in the Facebook groups that pertain to your niche and what you do. go in and let people, I think Discord's a great place to go and do stuff. I think Reddit is fantastic. A lot of people these are things people just don't spend time on. Going on to Twitter is where I sort of started to build an audience because I knew a lot of media people were hanging out there. That might not be perfect for everybody.
Yeah.
But you want to hang out in the area where your audience is and involve yourself in that spot.
Discord. Tell me if I'm missing something here. I've tried with Discord. I'm into investing. I'm into stocks and trading, and I've been in a couple of Discord groups, and it's like being in that. When you're in that giant group text
Yeah, of
that
course.
just keeps going off,
Yeah.
and there's no end, and you have to turn the alerts off at some point because there's like 30 people in there. It's a conversation that never ends. So Discord, I like Discord, but I find it's overwhelming. Maybe it's my ADD.
Yeah, all right. So it's not one of my favorites, but I
Okay.
do know that it's a great place to tell people about my show.
Yeah.
So I think when we talk about audience building, and especially when it comes to building a podcast, a lot of people are looking for that hockey stick growth. What's the one thing that's going to make something go pow and make it explode and make me popular and famous? And the answer is nothing. Like, guests aren't even going to do it. Like a great guest, you're going to get one, oh, I got an extra 500 downloads because I had a great guest on one week.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? People aren't coming back next week.
Yeah.
Also, here's the other thing about big guests. I could get Gordon Ramsay on my show, and I don't expect that will move the needle too much for my show because Gordon Ramsay is on Fox every night. People can get their feed, they can be fed their Gordon Ramsay through Fox. They don't need to come to my show to do it. So you're the star of your show. People come to the show for the host. They're coming to you for the things that you're offering them every week. So be consistent in that message and what you do. It's nice when a guest goes and who has a big following will go and retweet the show and get more eyes on it. I think that's always a good thing. I don't think it's a requirement. I don't think a guest is your guest anymore once you ask them to do work for your show. I don't think it's fair.
Yeah.
However, it's building blocks. Build. I think when people say, "Is my show doing well?" I said, "Well, did you go up? Did you go up last week? Or okay, you didn't go up last week. Well, why was that? Well, look at that. It's March. It's spring break. People took a vacation.
Yeah.
What's that? American Thanksgiving? Yeah, people are out shopping right through to Christmas. If you have a health podcast, January, there is no better time to market your health podcast than in January because everyone's looking to lose a few pounds. So it's cyclical. So I always ask people when you want to measure to see how well you did, measure it against the last 90 days. 90 days is a long time when you just start your podcast. So people are like, well, how'd this episode do? I said, well, let at least 30 days go by before we know. This is an on-demand space. People will consume it whenever they want, right? And so, like, who's your big competition when it comes to an on-demand show that's on YouTube or in podcasting? And you're up against time. You're up against all the stuff people have to do for a living. That's what you're up against. And here's my other favorite question, Mike, and I'll throw it out to you. What is Netflix? What is their biggest competition?
What is Netflix's big? Amazon?
It's sleep. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, again, you have to think this way.
Yeah.
It's not, also the other thing is, again, with the Widgets podcast, but your best friend is the Widgets podcast. So appear on every Widgets podcast possible out there in order to let people know, because the rising tide lifts all boats. This is not NBC versus CBS versus ABC and the Love Boat and the Dukes of Hazzard and Dallas on a Friday night. Mm-hmm. And, it starts at 8. People will listen to it whenever they want. And so even, the algorithm in Apple and Spotify, when people finish one health podcast, hey, you just finished a health podcast. Have you checked out this other health podcast?
Right.
Right? They want to keep you watching and listening. YouTube is serving you the next one, the next video. It is always something related to something you've done. Even this conversation we're having about podcasting and health on my phone is going to lead to a whole bunch of different videos that are going to serve to me because, the phones are listening. I've got a device in the corner. It's also likely listening to me as well. And I've Googled all this stuff as well in prep for this interview. So all this stuff is going to come back to me. And that's the way that those places work. I will say that, Apple's data that they collect really is only the stuff that you follow. So when you hit follow, you're going to get more of that stuff served to you.
Yeah.
When you finish a show on Netflix, hey, you like this action movie? Have you checked out this other action movie?
Yeah.
So your perceived competition is your friend. So appear on their podcast and be their best friend.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed is, like right now, this is the exact experience I'm going to convey, and that is that other podcasters make fantastic guests. They have good mics a lot of the time. I mean, we've been fortunate. They have good setups, so the visual's good, and they just get the format. So it's just a smooth, cohesive process, and it's always fun. I mean, because I'm a podcaster, I like talking to podcasters. You're probably the same. But that's something people should consider too if they are launching a podcast, is approach other podcasters, because they do make some of the best guests.
Toronto Mike, who started a podcast, he started a blog back in 2010-ish, and then I got a podcast, and now he's a regular guest on CNN. I mean, yeah, because he's got the setup and he's ready to go, and it costs CNN nothing to bring him on. He's got a great setup. He does the part. He wears his Leaf shirt on there, and he's getting a 3-minute segment on CNN. Yeah, absolutely.
That's wild.
Good. I mean, good for him. I mean, I'm sure every radio and broadcaster feels slighted by the fact that this podcaster's getting pushed to the front on CNN, but that's the way it's going now.
Yeah. And that, again, is just another show of the social acceptance, the cultural acceptance of podcasting today. It's a cool thing to do now. 5 years ago, when I started doing this podcast, it's actually 6 years ago now, when you told people you were doing a podcast, they're like, oh yeah? When you tell people now you're doing a podcast, the response is always positive. It's always curious. Oh, really? Oh, that's cool. What is it about? It's completely perceived differently from 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, and it also speaks a little bit to, the difficulty in getting your show out there, because there are 4 million podcasts out there. However, I'd like to preface that there are only 350,000 that are active. And so, how do we get like, hey, babe, can we talk, to become more popular? And that's, podcasting does not have a discoverability problem, but your podcast might have a discoverability problem. So I encourage everybody to have an address on the internet, get a website that's going to be Google friendly, and make sure that people can find you in some particular way. Make sure you're all on the necessary platforms. And if that means YouTube and you don't have cameras, go buy headliner.app and make yourself some audiograms and just upload the audio to YouTube, so at least you're playing in the Google game. And I say the Google game, YouTube is the world's second biggest search engine. So you want to be a part of that as well. I think we're going to find that there's going to be a time when someone's going to go in and say, well, tell me more about Matt Cundill. And they'll drop that into ChatGPT, and somewhere along the way, this conversation we're having now may pop up and be cited as a source. One of the things I do with my image artwork is I put my logo in the image artwork, so that when people Google somebody and look for an image, that it's flagged. It says Sound Off Podcast. And so there is a little bit of things you can do. They're all what I call really small wins, but all that small stuff really adds up to some good things.
Yeah. Talk about the role of AI. Are there AI tools that are out there now that can help people develop their platforms?
Lots. And most of them are now built into some of the tools that I've already mentioned. So something like Riverside has AI built in. A lot of it has to do with voice. Sometimes it has to do with just the eye placement. You can even have, the eyes looking forward in something like Descript. Descript.
What, it changes the eyes?
Yeah, Descript, I think, does that where, I can move around and be darty and look over here at this work, and it will correct it so that my eyes are looking forward.
Really?
Yeah,
that's wild.
Also in Descript, and I have used this a couple times, and I will preface that there are some permissions you have to go through before this is done. So I'm not sitting here creating stuff, but I did get a call from a client who said, it was a yoga podcast, and she said, I said move to the right, and I meant to say move to the left. And rather than calling her back in the studio, I could just go onto the script and change the word left to right, and it replicated her voice. And then I pasted it back into so that the correct instruction came out on the show.
Mm.
Now she did say that we could do this and gave permission to Descript to do that, but you can make little changes like that just, with the keyboard. One of the things Descript does really well is you can edit by keyboard. Mike, you done production, you're using sound waves, you're looking at waves, you're looking at many different things. But I think in 2019, when Descript came out with this, okay, here's the transcription of the show, and you wanted to remove just actual visual words, people could go in and just remove the words. And that was the edit.
Right.
Genius. That is complete genius for somebody who doesn't know anything about sound waves. Listen, I don't edit that way because I've been brought up differently, and you're not going to do it either because you've worked in this for years. But for anybody who's doesn't work with this stuff, Descript, to be able to go in and just remove the words, and that's great. Taking out all the ums and ahs, that's great. So AI has played a great role in this. Another thing it's done is for show notes. Oh my God, Mike, I can't write show notes. This is so dull writing show notes.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, ChatGPT does a pretty good job. Treat it like an intern. When you give it prompts, pretend it's an 18-year-old intern who has just shown up at your company, and give it the instructions. I need show notes for this podcast episode, 300 words, and focus on this. Oh, and write it in the first person. Boom. 90% of the work is done for you.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Not a bad thing.
No, it's amazing how much ChatGPT is just as a resource for just business in general. It's unreal, especially in this space.
Yeah, and so the other thing that I've always found, oh my God, I can't believe I have to do this, and I can't do it today. Writing promos. Writing promos for me has been, oh my God, I can't believe I have to write promos today for the voice person. It's going to take forever, and I don't want it. Well, now, hey, can you write me a promo about the Mike C podcast? And I want Mike to voice it, and I want it 30 seconds, and hey, Matt, how's this? Boom. And I'm like, okay, well, let's tweak it a bit. And it takes me 10 minutes now to do what used to take me 40 or 50 minutes. I've had it write biographies about myself that I didn't feel I could write. I said, can you write, I'm going to be appearing at a conference. Can you write 200 words? And it wrote it better than I could write it because I'm shy, or I've got filters, or I think differently about myself. It gave me an unencumbered piece. I thought, that looks pretty good. Yeah, that looks like me. And I would have forgotten about 4 of those things or 4 of those accomplishments that I've done.
I'm talking to a guy who 15, 16 years ago used to email me and say, hey, I'm trying to get this promo done. I'm a little behind. Give me another hour. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Those days are gone.
Exactly, because I can get past that stuff now. It allows me to get over myself. I had somebody, I said, oh, they were changing the name of their show, or they were changing their name because they'd gotten married, and what should their new Instagram handle be? And they didn't know what it was. What's the best one? I just asked ChatGPT, and I go, this is the one. Let it make the decision for you, because it doesn't have feelings and doesn't have filters and it doesn't need to get over itself.
Right.
Right.
Right. That's so wild. It's made life so much easier for people in this space, for sure.
But I will throw out a warning that if you're just going to cut and paste whatever it gives you, Google's going to know that, and Google's going to mark you down. So write it from the heart.
So Google's intuitive on that.
Yep.
Wow.
They're onto it now.
Yeah. So you consult podcasters through your company. You've been instrumental in contributing to our growth. And I think the reason we're on YouTube is because you told us to get on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. So props to you, man. But, I'm grateful for having you in our corner, and I have nothing but good things to say about you and Sound Off. If anyone has any questions, or if they have an idea for a new podcast, how can they contact you and have a conversation?
Yeah, simple email. It's matt@soundoff.network. Is that easy? Is that easy to remember? I hope so. It's matt@soundoff.network.
All right. We'll put that up. And we'll include that in the show notes too. And plug your podcast while you're here.
Yeah, it's the Sound Off Podcast. You can find it at soundoffpodcast.com.
We'll put that up too, man. Matt, this has been a lot of fun. I knew it would be. I love talking to you, and it's always great to catch up.
Likewise.
Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you.
That'll do it for this edition. We are out of here. Click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts. And always drop by Mikeseapodcast.com for the latest on what we're up to. Until next time, bye, everybody.